This is Anarchast.
Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast from Acapulco, Mexico. This is our first trans-oceanic Anarchast. Coming in from Sweden, we have Klaus Bernpaintner. How are you, Klaus?
Doing good, how are you?
I'm doing good. So you're our first non-North American guest that we've had on, and you're over there in Sweden. Are you in Stockholm or somewhere else?
I'm in Stockholm, yes.
Oh, great. And very first question I ask everyone is, how did you become an anarchist?
Well, it was a few years ago now. I worked in finance and as an analyst. And around 2007, 2008, I realized there was something wrong with economic theory, the way I had been taught it. And even in the very fancy courses and classes I'd taken, I have an MBA, US MBA, and all kinds of academic backgrounds, and but still I couldn't explain what this financial crisis was about, where it came from. And it appeared to me that even all my colleagues, very smart people, none of them could explain it either. So I asked around and realized that there was very little understanding of what was going on, what was wrong. And it just took everybody by surprise. And I started to ask some very basic questions. Because I thought there has to be somebody who understands these things. So I looked around on the web and found some people, a handful of people that seemed to know what the problem was. So I started following some links, and eventually I found something called Austrian economics. Never heard of it before. So I checked it out on Wikipedia and other sites, and it was a completely different language from what I was used to. And then I found the Mises website and started reading their daily articles. And pretty soon things started to fall into place for me, because I had sort of set up a handful of criteria of questions that I wanted the sound economic theory to be able to answer. And I realized that this Austrian theory seemed to provide the answers to those questions. And when I realized that, I just started to read everything I came across, and pretty soon I was convinced Austrian. And by that time I realized that the problem with the economy was government, the state. And the conclusion was obviously that the state should get out of the economy. And then I started to ask the question, well, the state should be in the economy. The state messes up the economy. What else does it mess up? And I started to look at one thing after another, and I realized that it messes up pretty much everything it puts its hands on. And then the next question was obviously, well, if it seems to mess up everything it touches, what is it good for? And why do we even have it? And then I came to the point where I realized that it's really good for nothing. And that was kind of the point that many people come to when they realize, maybe I'm an anarchist. I've heard so many bad things about that word. I mean, it's chaos, indeed. But then it matured in my mind, and after a while I realized, yes, I suppose I am an anarchist, in the sense that I don't think that we need any kind of chiefs or government, forceful governments. I mean, we can still have some kind of a hierarchies or leaders, things like that. It could be based on force. So that's my
Oh, that's great. It's really interesting. That's sort of how I got into Austrian economics as well. But I did it in the crash before years, before the 2008 crash. I did it in the tech bubble crash, because I had a internet company that went from being worth $250 million to being worth barely anything in a couple of months, really. And I did this exact same thing. I asked so many people, smart people, well, you'd think they're smart, you know, they've got their MBAs and all those things, and they had no clue. They just shrugged their shoulders and just said, well, that's just what happens sometimes. And I just was not happy with that response. So I went on a bit of a tour of knowledge for many years, and I went through the exact same progression as you. I started with Austrian economics and found anarchism through that, and realized the same thing, that the government is unnecessary evil and not a necessary evil. Yeah, so it's really interesting. I really wanted to have you on. Being from Sweden, we were talking over email, and you were telling me so many amazing things about what many people think about this socialist paradise of Sweden. So let's hear it from the horse's mouth. How is it to live in the most perfect socialist country on earth?
It's wonderful. No, I mean, Sweden is full of very nice people, and it's good in so many ways. But it's sad to see how it's deteriorating, and of course it's the same culprit as usual. I don't know where to start, really. There's so many things to talk about, but one thing that I think is characteristic for Sweden is we have a long tradition of social engineering, and then because of that we have politics basically in every part of our lives. You have politics in, well, of course, you have politics in business, you have politics in the family. That's what annoys me perhaps the most. You have politicians trying to tell people how to run their families, that mothers need to work to contribute to the economy, otherwise they're worth nothing. So you have incentives, you have a tax system and economic incentives for both parents to work. It's really very hard for family to, for just one parent to provide for a family. It's almost impossible. And you have politics in daycare, you have politics in school, you have politics everywhere. You have these politicians trying to realize their utopias on children of all ages. And another aspect of this is you have, I think it was Julian Assange said that Sweden is the Saudi Arabia of feminism. And it's probably true, because you have all these gender issues all the time, everywhere. There's always a gender aspect on everything. Last thing I read was today, apparently there's too few women in forestry. So the government has ordered a gender equality study from the forestry companies to make sure that they hire more women to drive the forest machines. Things like that. Every day, there's always a gender aspect on everything.
I've never heard that. That's very interesting to hear. You were telling me one thing that I was shocked to hear, but although knowing socialism I shouldn't have been, is that Sweden has outlawed homeschooling now, and that's one of the reasons you're going to leave Sweden. Is that correct?
Well, the thing is, it's funny that the reaction you had to when I told you homeschooling was outlawed in Sweden. It was outlawed in 2010. You were shocked, but most Swedes, they don't even know what homeschooling is. So, what's homeschooling anyway? Why is it a big deal? That's one reaction. Another common reaction is, well, it's a good thing they outlawed it, so parents can brainwash their children. Because parents aren't really trusted to raise their children here. You always want to make sure that they go to government schools, government preschools, and daycare from age 1. That's the ideal. When children turn 1, they should be handed over to the state. And parents that don't do that, they are suspect in many ways. So Sweden outlawed homeschooling in 2010. Well, they didn't actually outlaw it, but they made it so hard. You have to have a really, really serious reason to be allowed to homeschool. So most people don't qualify for it. Germany outlawed homeschooling in 1938, by the way, as a comparison. And they are the only two countries that have, European countries that have outlawed homeschooling. And that law is in place in Germany still.
Wow.
So there are cases of families in exile from Sweden. There are about, right now I think there are about 15 families that have emigrated to Åland, which is an island between Sweden and Finland. It's Swedish there, but it belongs to Finland, so it's under Finnish jurisdiction, and they're much more, they accept homeschooling. There's no problem there. But in Sweden there's been a number of cases where children have been seized or taken away by social services for the custody of their families because they have been homeschooling. There's one case, family, Dominic Johansson, who was taken his family years ago. He was 7. And only now are they sort of, there was a court decision that the child should be united with his family 2 years later. But he's still not with his family. It can take quite a bit of time before he's actually back, because you will have other authorities appealing the decision and so on, so it can take a while still. But it's a very famous case outside of Sweden. Most Swedes have never heard of it. And the reaction to that case when you tell people about it is always, well, there's got to be some reason for it. It can't just be because they're homeschooled. Must have some weird ideas or something like that. But the only reason the authorities have given is that he had, what they came up with him after the fact. They said, well, he had a cavity. Also, there was a vaccination he hadn't.
The vaccinations, they're doing that in the U.S. right now.
It was one. So
yeah, there's a lot going on in the U.S. right now that's similar to Sweden with the Obamacare. How is the Swedish socialist medical care system?
Well, if you want to know what Obamacare will be like in 20 years, you can come here. And what you do is you go to an emergency room and you wait for emergency care. It's not unusual that people wait for 10 hours to get care. A friend of mine, his mother had cancer and she passed away recently, but when she came to the hospital, she had to wait for 15 hours in the corridor to get treatment, routinely received by doctors, even though she had no. So just come here if you want to see what it will be like. You know, it sounds like a very good idea, but it just doesn't work. Nobody can make it work. Doesn't matter how smart you are, it cannot be made to work.
Yeah, I understand. I'm from Canada originally, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I used to always have to go to emergency rooms because to actually see a doctor would oftentimes take weeks. My own mother, for the last few winters, she's been having some problems and she wanted to go see the doctor, and I said, why don't you go see him? And she says, oh, it takes weeks, by then I'll probably be better. And so, yeah, that's the Canadian healthcare or medical care system. Here down in Mexico, it's quite interesting. I just had a friend who wasn't feeling well, and he's from the U.S. He's down here visiting, and he goes, what should I do? And I said, well, you can go to a pharmacy. Every single pharmacy has a doctor on staff, and it costs 20 pesos to get a consultation. That's about $1.30. and also there's a doctor that, there's many doctors, there's one that happens just to be in his building, and they'll actually come up to his room and they'll be there in a couple minutes, and the total consultation usually costs about $40. And so that's what free market medical care looks like compared to the socialist medical care.
Yeah, well, of course, the politicians have private insurance, health insurance.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I don't know why. Maybe they don't believe in the government system. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I heard about Obama recently as well.
They're so important. I don't know, something like that.
That's what I heard about Obama recently as well, is that he's excluding himself from Obamacare, and a lot of those congressmen and people are, so they don't have to do it. I think Nancy Pelosi doesn't have to do it. They actually can give, you know, to their favorite people who bribe them money, they can not have to do the Obamacare as well. So it's really just for the serfs and for the slaves. So that's nice. And so you mentioned right off the top that you feel like Sweden is really going downhill. Is there anything else that you can tell us about what you're seeing over there that is not going in the right direction?
Well, they are scaring away companies, of course, with the taxes we have to pay for the health care and to pay for everything. Really don't see any companies becoming big anymore. You have the big companies, they were created about 100 years ago. And then you have small companies, like one-man companies, two family companies. But you don't have any, very few, I should say, companies going from small to mid-size to big. It doesn't really happen anymore. Because before they become mid-size, they leave the country. So I'm not sure who's going to pay for the future welfare that were promised. That's another thing. And of course we have the government pension schemes, which is also, like every other place, it's bankrupt, of course. People don't know it yet, but they will in a few years' time.
Is it like the US where they've actually spent all the money already and it's just a big IOU sitting there?
Yeah, I mean, people working today, they pay for the pensioners. And then, of course, people have the bad taste of living longer, which is a problem for the state. The original age for pensions was 65. And that was the average life expectancy at the time. So the idea was that you would work and pay into the system, and then you would go and die and never claim anything. But then people had the bad taste of sort of living longer. And that's when they had to, the current people working had to pay for those that were for the pension. So the whole system is bankrupt. It's a Ponzi scheme, like every place else.
Yeah. How is the government? Is it in debt in Sweden as well? I don't know anything about the finances of the government there.
Of course, it's in debt. They've actually worked down the debt a little bit, and they've done some good things, but not enough. They've lowered the taxes somewhat for lower income earners, which is an improvement. But there's so many other things that are wrong. I mean, nominally we don't have a socialist government. We have a so-called conservatives, or yeah, that's what they were called. We don't have a social democratic or communist government by name, but of course they are socialists. We don't really have any libertarian-minded or old-time conservatives anymore. So there's so much that needs to be done that hasn't been done, and probably won't be done in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's probably like the US. It probably all has to just fall apart at this point to have any real change. There's too many people who are part of the system now and who depend on the system, and so.
Yeah, I don't see a way how this could change politically. It's never going to happen. Never. It has to fall apart. I mean, we do what we can do. I'm associated with the Swedish Mises Institute, and we're probably the most, well, we are the most radical, liberty-minded group. So we run the Swedish Mises website, we write articles, our own articles, and we translate articles. So we're quite active, and we're attracting more and more people. Also, I've organized the Swedish Freedom Fest twice. I had the last one was in May, and so we had about 100 visitors, and people really enjoyed it and said that we're going to come next year and bring their friends. So that's growing too. So we're doing what we can. Not that I believe that we can change the system, but maybe we can save a few souls and have a little fun along the way. That's what it's about.
That's great. Can you give us the websites for both Mises in Sweden and Freedom Fest?
Yeah, it's Mises.se and freedomfest.se.
That's great. And that's all for today. That's all the time we have, but I really appreciate you coming on with us, and I wish you luck over there in socialist Sweden.
Yep, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That's all for today. This has been another episode of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.